Hello everyone, and welcome to the CircuitPython Weekly for April 6th, 2020. This is the time of the week that we get together to talk about all things CircuitPython. I'm Katney, and I am sponsored by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython. CircuitPython is a version of Python that runs on tiny computers called microcontrollers. CircuitPython development is sponsored by Adafruit. Please support them by purchasing hardware from adafruit.com. Or during this time, please support them by purchasing hardware from our partner DigiKey at digikey.com. This meeting is recorded. It normally happens at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on Mondays. We host it on the Adafruit Discord, which you can get to at adafru.it/discord. And the recording is of the CircuitPython audio channel and the CircuitPython chat channel, and that will be put on YouTube when this is done. If you are interested in participating but don't want to be recorded, that's absolutely fine. You can let us know that you're lurking or put your status updates and so on in the notes document, and I will read them off as we go along. If we change the time for the meeting, we let people know in the CircuitPython channel on Discord. You can be added to the CircuitPythonistas role if you would like to be notified about changes to the meeting or about reminders about when the meeting is going to start. The recording is released on most podcast services. If you find that it is not available on your favorite podcast service, please let us know. This meeting is held in 5 parts. The first part is community news, which is a look at things going on in the community related to CircuitPython and Python in general. The second part is the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. It is a statistical overview of the entire project by the numbers and gives us a chance to talk about what's going on with it aside from what it is that we're actually up to. The next section is Hug Reports. Hug Reports is a chance to recognize people for doing something good. We take some time, go down the list. It is held as a round robin. I will start and then continue down the list alphabetically and loop back to the top, giving everybody who wants a chance to give a hug report. Again, if you are lurking or you are text only, please let us know, and I will read off notes from the document from people who are lurking or missing the meeting as I go. Forgot to mention as well, if you are going to be missing the meeting, you can still put notes in the notes document that we post after each meeting for the following meeting, and we can read them off as if you were there. The next section is status updates. Status updates is a chance to take a couple minutes and talk about what you've been up to since the last meeting, what you're going to be up to until the next meeting. And it just gives us a chance to hear what's going on with everyone. And it's also an opportunity to provide tips and tricks for anything that anyone has questions about. The last section is In the Weeds. In the Weeds is an opportunity for more long-form discussions. They may come out of status updates, or you may already have an In the Weeds topic. If you do, please add it to the notes document and put your name next to it so we know who posted it, and we will go through them when we get to that point. If you have In the Weeds topics, please add them as soon as you are aware of them so that we're not waiting at the end to find out what everybody wants to talk about. And that sums up the meeting. I think that covers just about everything. So we're going to go ahead and get started with community news. First up, Stanford is offering a free introductory coding course in Python with a very short deadline. And as an active community service, a group of Stanford computer science instructors are coming together to offer their teaching services free of charge for people who want to learn introductory coding subject to availability. This is a one-time offering during the COVID-19 situation. The course dates are April 13th until May 22nd. Anyone who has internet available is eligible. No coding experience is needed. And the deadline for students is April 8th. The deadline to teach is April 3rd. So if that's something you're interested in, check it out on Stanford's site. There's a link in the notes. The crowd supply campaign for the Circuit Brains Deluxe, which is an M4 castellated solderable board that comes preloaded with CircuitPython. It's by Nullbytes Lab LLC. The crowd supply campaign was launched last week. So if you're interested in a tiny little M4 that can be added to your project, check that out. DigiKey posted to Twitter a project from Sean Heimel on making a temperature logger with the STM32F405 Express. I should be posting the links to these things, so I'm going to go back and do that. Hold on. Here's the Stanford project.
I've been doing them, Katney.
Oh, you have, and I've totally missed it. All right,
that's
excellent.
Fine.
So, the Sean Heimel project on making a temperature logger, excellent. Next up, Sophie assembled her NeoPixel dodecahedron made of custom milled PCBs and 55 NeoPixel LEDs running CircuitPython code. There's a new Friday Fun blog post last week from Les P, who posted free projects from his Pi user section of Linux Format magazine. If I remember correctly, it includes like hacking, things like hacking. I'm totally blocking on the name of the game now. Hacking games, working with other stuff. I've not written it down and have promptly forgotten. But check it out. It's the section of that he writes of Linux Format magazine, and he's included a bunch of them on his site. Next up, connecting an MLX 90393 magnetometer to an Adafruit Feather M0 running CircuitPython is a project listed on learnmicropython.com, and there are more projects available there as well. If you know of cool CircuitPython stuff that happened in the last week, help us highlight it by making a PR to the newsletter. You can also file an issue, and there are many ways to get us that information, but if you have any kind of Python on hardware news or projects or things that you're working on, we can add that and you can be part of the newsletter as well. And that is community news. Next up, the state of CircuitPython, libraries, and Blinka. So this is a few sections. We'll talk about it overall, then we'll talk about the core, the libraries, and Blinka separately. So overall, we had 36 pull requests merged by 16 authors. I see a couple new names in there that I don't recognize. Jim Bob Bennett, HHK7734, D. Malavi, and Michael Lass are names that I do not recognize. So thank you to our new contributors. And 12 reviewers, which is also amazing. Thank you to everybody who's been reviewing as well. We can't do everything without both people giving us stuff to review and people reviewing it. And in terms of issues, we had 26 issues closed by 12 people and 7 opened by 7 people. So we are net down, which is also excellent. Overall, we had 5.1.0 stable released last week, which is amazing. We talked last week about the release candidate and we didn't find any major issues, so we released it. In terms of that, please feel free to test it and let us know if you do find any issues. And I believe that we are looking towards a new unstable release coming soon with low power. Is that right, Scott?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So look for that coming soon. Please test that on all your projects as well, and let us know if you have any issues. In terms of the libraries, we have been going through the library infrastructure issues and getting everything up to standard. So there have been a number of PRs and fixes going in that are more house cleaning than they are code changes. And Melissa's been doing some great stuff with Blinka. There's a new guide out on how to add a new board. So we are making a lot of progress on everything. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott to talk about the core.
Awesome. Thank you, Kattni. So in the core, over the last week, we had 6 pull requests merged from 5 different authors. A couple new folks, so thanks to Zobs and BD34 for 34N for their contributions. We had 2 reviewers, so thank you to myself and Dan for the reviewing. And again, we're always looking for reviewers, so keep that in mind. We have 7 open pull requests where the oldest is 118 days. I think this is the same one that we've had for a while. And the newest is 10 days. So we do have some stuff in the middle ground, but lots of good long-term stuff. The big chunky pull requests in there. So that's all good. Issues-wise, we had 4 closed issues by 2 people and 2 open by 2 people. So we're actually net down 2, which is good for us. And we have a total of 268 open issues. Check the notes doc for a link to all of the open issues. We have 6 active milestones and 4 issues that aren't assigned a milestone. Because we're kind of in this like post-stable release state, we're not super diligent about watching our milestones, but there's nothing wrong with that. And then on the download side, we're still having some issues. I have been updating the CircuitPython.org with every release, just so boards are sorted by downloads, but we don't have kind of a reliable way of getting download stats yet. But it does look like we'll just use raw download logs, so we do get downloads per day, which is pretty neat. So yeah, expect to see that in the next few weeks as we get around to it. And that's it for the core.
Thanks, Scott. Next up is the libraries. We had 29 pull requests merged by 11 authors, including the names that I read off earlier. So thank you to our new contributors, and 11 reviewers, which is also excellent. I believe Andrew Tribble is actually new to reviewing, so that is always excellent to see. Thank you very much for joining us there. The oldest pull request we merged was 66 days, so we've been keeping up pretty well with that, leaving us with 23 open pull requests. And I know we've been working through those as well. There were 21 issues closed by 10 people and 4 open by 4 people, so we are net down. A lot of that is possibly tied to the stuff that I was going through and doing, but not all of it. So there's definitely some actual churn going on in the issues, and that's excellent. Leaving us with 162 open issues total across all the libraries. If you want to see all this information, it is available at circuitpython.org/contributing. And as the website says, if you are looking to contribute, it is an excellent place to start. You can go to that site. It has all of the open PRs, all of the open issues, and all of the current library infrastructure issues. And all of those are possibly containing something that you may be able to work on. This all assumes that you will get some experience with Git and GitHub, which we are happy to help you with. And there's also a guide for that as well. But don't be intimidated. There are plenty of things that we can find that are for that are good first issues, we call them, and that's the type of thing that you can do if you've never contributed before. And we, like I said, are always happy to help. You can always ask questions on Discord or GitHub, and we will do our best to answer. In the last 7 days, we had 2 new libraries, BLE MIDI and BLE IBBQ, and a number of updated libraries, the list of which I will not read off. Which means now it is time for me to turn it over to Melissa to talk about Blinka.
Hello, so I'm going to talk about Blinka, which is our CircuitPython compatibility layer for Raspberry Pi and other single board computers. And we had, in the last week, one pull request merged by one author and one reviewer. We have one open pull request, which actually has been merged in this morning. There's one closed issue by one person and one open by one person, and that leaves 37 open issues at the moment. There have been 2002 PyPI downloads in the last week, and we are currently supporting 43 boards. And that's it.
Excellent. Thank you. And that is the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. Next up, Hug Reports. So, like I said earlier, Hug Reports is an opportunity to take a moment and recognize people for doing something good. We do this every week. It is held as a round robin where I will start as an example and then I will go down the list alphabetically, either calling on you to unmute your mic and let us know your Hug Reports, or if you are text only, I will read off your notes when I get to them. If you are missing the meeting, I will read off your notes alphabetically as if you were there. And if you're lurking, I will skip over you and go to the next person. So I will get started then. First off, I have a Hug report from someone else, from Kevin at DigiKey, to everyone in the Help with CircuitPython channel that helped with his fire truck bed siren project. He gave a Hug report on Show and Tell last week, and I wanted to let you guys know, since I know that there are a number of people who helped him out in this meeting. Hug report to Summersoft for help with understanding Adabot, or at least verification that I had the right idea, and for putting together the requested updates to clean up some of the issues with Adabot checks. Hug report to Jeff Epler for releasing 5.1.0 stable and for taking notes today. To Ann B for all her great work on the newsletter since it was handed over to us entirely. To Dylan for all the work going into submitting all of the OSHWA certification applications. To Adafruit for the first set of boards being certified as open source by OSHWA. 15 CircuitPython compatible boards were certified. To John Park for running a successful mini show and tell last week. We have been tasked with learning how to run it in the event that Phil and Lamore are otherwise occupied, which may or may not happen during all of this craziness. And so each of us will be running a tiny version of show and tell over the next couple weeks. And that was the first one, and that was John Parks, and it went really well. Hug report to Adafruit for continuing efforts during the COVID-19 outbreak, both in terms of supporting Adafruit folks internally and continuing to provide support and equipment to the New York City area. And a group hug to the community. Continue to stay strong and positive and support each other. I am heartwarmed by the amount of support that has continued on Discord. Keep it up. I have no changes to suggest. It's just I wanted to recognize that everyone has been doing a great job with helping everyone else out and helping out with projects and, you know, being patient with new people who are joining us and all of that. So thank you very much for that. Kinger North is lurking. So next up is Melissa.
Hello. So I wanted to give a hug report to Tanu for quickly reviewing my CircuitPython.org pull requests. A hug report to Jepler for your help with the spy on IOCTL. I was able to get past some sticking points with your code. And Foamy Guy for testing, merging, and pushing the Featherwing library. And to Adafruit for continuing to be helpful to everybody in this crisis and your awesome ability to keep going on and maintain everyone internally. That's it.
All right. Thank you. Lurking, and next up is Summersoft.
Apologies, I was reading elsewhere and was not prepared. I'm not used to being on voice anymore. So I want to give a hug report to Scott, Dan, Jeff, and Zobs for highlighting and participating in the GitHub Actions issue regarding their aptitude repository failures. It's one thing to highlight it in a meaningful way and just complain about it, which we have not done, and I think that's cool. And then also a hug report to the whole Adafruit team for both working on combating COVID-19 supply chain issues and having the agility to maximize the Adafruit community's normalcy. I think that's pretty important, and you guys have done a bang-up job. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next up is Scott.
Hello. First and foremost, hug report to Jerry H, which I still have to remind myself was not Jerry N, but Jerry H, for testing the BLE MIDI stuff and working with me last week on figuring out what the issues were. So thanks to Jerry H for that. Thanks to Carter for the cherries and peaches and Animal Crossing, and Nina for the pears. That was playing that this weekend, and that was fun. Got to visit their islands. Hug report to Esden and TNT for the FPGA help. I was trying to lay everything else out for an FPGA feather and got some answers there. One I should add is thanks to Chris Gamble and Eric Moyer for Hardware Happy Hour Discord server. So for those of you who don't know, Hardware Happy Hour is a usually in-person meetup every week. And because obviously nobody can meet up, I created a Discord server last week and we had our first virtual 3H. And so that was really cool. If you're interested in that, let me know and I'm happy to share an invite link to that Discord server as well. It's kind of still centered around different cities. But hopefully they'll be, hopefully we'll be able to pick up with in-person meetings once we all have that ability. Thanks to John Park for Key Matrix Fun, working on hacking an old MIDI controller, and you should see some interesting guide stuff around key matrices as well. Thanks to Hierophect for jumping into the deep end of linkers and linker scripts with me. I know it's daunting and overwhelming, but I'm excited for multiple of us to be able to handle it. Thanks to Jeff Epler for the foundational work with Proto Matter and the frame buff display stuff. I know that I gave a non-trivial amount of feedback, but I think it's going to be a really good foundation. So thanks for that. And lastly, thanks to Zobs for the light export. If you didn't see, we now actually have a RISC-V build for CircuitPython, and that is now building CircuitPython for the FOMU, which is an FPGA board with a RISC-V soft core on it, which is really neat. And that's it for me.
All right, thanks, Scott. Next up is V923Z. Do you want me to read it off? Okay, no problem. So hug report to Jeff Epler for 5.1.0, to Dan H for proposing Microlab integration into CircuitPython in the first place, Summersoft for his help on GitHub Actions, and a group hug for all the encouragement and positive reception. All right. And
yeah, in the meantime, I fixed my microphone. But
okay.
You have finished that. Thanks a lot.
Okay. All right. So Andrew is lurking, but I have notes, so I will read those off. Which is a group hug. I also have notes for Carter, who is lurking but has notes, to Dan H for help with BLE, quick ID of issue and PR fix to help with a forum thread. This one was driving me crazy, so helped save my sanity. Next up is C. Grover.
Hi there. Group hug to the team in the community, and 5.1.0 is working great on a couple of projects I've been working on. And thanks to John Park for giving me a very helpful hint about dealing with lighting gel color coats. Don't try to sterilize them. You'll get a stain on your workbench. Anyway, that's all I got.
All right, fair enough. Next up is Charles.
a group hug to all the whole community, and also a hug to Phil and Lamore for keeping going beyond beyond all this mess in New York City, because I have friends who live there, and it's like impossible to do anything, including it's very hard to go shopping even. So I hope everything works out for them and for the community. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charles. Next up is Dan.
Hello. So to reciprocate on Carter's, thanks for pointing out the regression with scanning, with BLE scanning in the BLE library. It was easy to fix, but we should have noticed it earlier. Thanks to Jeff Epler for doing the 5.10 release. That went really smoothly, and he now knows how releases work. And it's nice to have another person being able to do that. And thanks to Adafruit in general for all the personal protective equipment design and manufacturing that they're doing in New York City. It's pretty amazing to watch. Okay.
All right, thanks, Dan. AP is lurking. David Glaude, I have notes for, so I will read off. Of hug report to Foamy Guy and Lady Ada for the IS31FL3731 PR review. Duester is lurking, so next up is Foamy Guy.
Right. So a couple hug reports this week. One for Jeff Epler for the 5.10 release. Got that running on a couple of devices here as well. Somebody else had mentioned that, so I've got that running on a few of my projects as well. Haven't seen any issues. So happy, joy for the new release. Lady Ada for some calibration scripts that she had created for magnetometers, and I forgot to write this one in there, but also Kattni for reminding me to look back on that one. That one had slipped my radar. Jerry N was helping me get set up with the RFM69 radios to test the reliable datagram that he was working on. And also Dan H. and Carter as well, both for pointing me in the right direction on the J-Link tools and all the guides and everything I'll need to get that set up to recover one of my Featherboards. And that's all I have this week.
All right, thanks. Geek Guy's lurking. Next up is Hierophect.
So yeah, hugs this week to Scott, who helped me out with a bunch of linker stuff for the STM32H7 and F7 port. Looking forward to getting further into that as we go, but it's mostly done now. Thank you very much for your help. Thanks to Dan for helping me out with some silly typos, and just generally helping out with kind of random questions coming in from the STM32 port this week. And then just a group hug to everyone else. Hope you stay healthy. That's it.
All right, thanks. I have two people lurking, which means next up is Jeff.
Hello. I want to thank everybody who helped out with 5.10. It's heartwarming to hear your comments, but I did, the last inch of a long, well, not so long trip. My release notes list the pull request authors, but there are so many more. We've got the reviewers and we've got the community members, everyone giving us feedback, everyone trying it out. Thanks to all of you. And I also need to send a special shout out to Zoltan for Microlab. That is a huge effort, and now we're all going to benefit from it. So thanks to you, and thanks for open sourcing it. And I want to give a hug to everyone who is making and sharing cloth masks for us to use out in public right now. We've got to find ways to do stuff, and this is a concrete thing that we can do, and it will make me feel better to see that around. So thank you.
All right, excellent. Next up is Jerry.
Just a group hug. Nice to be part of the group.
All right, thank you. And that is hug reports, which means it is time for status updates. Status updates is time to take a couple minutes and talk about what you've been doing since the last meeting and what you're going to do until the next meeting. I know last week Scott also added a what are you doing outside of CircuitPython to give us a chance to just talk about what we've been doing to keep ourselves busy throughout this whole situation. So feel free to also include anything else you're working on that you would like to share. We do this in a round robin, just like hug reports. If there are notes for people, I will read them off. If someone is text only, I will read that off as well. And I will start and then move through the list. If there's anything that turns into a longer form discussion, it can be moved to in the weeds. Or depending on what kind of time we have, we can just work through it during status updates. And with that, I will get started. So last week, continued to move through the library infrastructure issues. We've been focusing on getting this list down to something that's much more manageable and much cleaner. There are checks on there that are more for us than they are for other people to do because they require credentials. And so we've been working through a lot of that stuff. I resolved so many read the docs issues. All libraries are now listed as a sub-project on CircuitPython, and all libraries in the bundle now have active docs and updated links. So that was a huge undertaking, including dealing with read the docs not loading. So managed to work around that and get somewhere with it. Worked with Summersoft to get some updates to the contributing page due to a couple issues with some Adabot checks. One of them was triggering improperly on pretty much everything, so it was just a massively long list of libraries that we didn't need to have in there because it wasn't accurate. Filed a number of issues on Adabot that I found as I dug through the library infrastructure issues. Continued to coordinate and assist with the OSHWA certification process for Adafruit hardware. And our first set of boards has been officially open source certified. There is a link. There is one board in there that was previously certified, and the rest are all within the past week. So we are working on getting all of our hardware certified, which is going to take some time. They are very recently started working on an API to make it easier for both them and others to certify large quantities of things at once, but that API is still in the works and we wanted to get this done. So we're doing it and we're working with them, and it's going to take some time for them to get through all of the things we've submitted. And I merged some PRs and some other various and sundry things. This week, I'm going to be testing some code for Colin. Obviously, we have people who are still working on guides and need that code tested. And Lemore often does that. However, Lemore is otherwise occupied at the moment, so I have been put in charge of testing random code. Today is Library Monday, but it's really more Library Week as I'm still going through all of those issues. There was an update to the 1.3-inch OLED display. It now has stemma, but we did not update the PCB files on GitHub, so I'll be doing that at some point. Tomorrow I will be putting together the newsletter video recap. It's still taking me quite a while to do that as I'm still very, very new to Premiere, so that pretty much takes up most of my day tomorrow. I'm going to be updating the newsletter today with the OSHWA certification updates. We're going to include the progress as it happens, but this week, since it's new, it'll be one of the features. So sneak peek. And then hoping to make some time for an Adabot crash course with Summersoft. The idea being that I would be able to fix some of the issues that I've been filing, because some of them are relatively simple, but I have very little understanding of what's going on with Adabot, so I would need a little help with that, and that is in the works. Outside of CircuitPython, which I don't have in my notes, played some Diablo 3 this weekend. Playing with someone who's never played it before, so we're actually playing through the campaign and it's kind of fun to go back through it with someone who's never done it before, versus the fact that I've done it a number of times. So that is kind of, I think, what I did. Watch some Good Omens as well, which if you're into that sort of thing and or have read the book, I highly recommend. It's Amazon Prime Video. And that's where I'm at, which means next up is Maker Melissa.
Hello. So I've been pretty busy this week. I went through all the boards on CircuitPython.org and looked up their add dates and added those to all the boards. Then I went and added a sort by date added feature to CircuitPython.org. And then I added an RSS feed to CircuitPython.org that makes use of those dates as well. I finished up some finishing touches on my Blinka guide, and that was published. I finished up the reskin on the web Bluetooth dashboard, and that is now live. I updated the associated Learn Guide images and information on there. And I wrote a pure Python spy module for the Adafruit pure.io Python library, and that is now live in Blinka. This week, I need to write up a blog post about the dashboard reskin. I need to add a section to Raspberry Pi guides about removing kernel drivers for the PyTFT, and then figure out what my next projects are. And that's it.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Certainly is lurking, but just popped some notes in that I will read off after I take a timestamp. I know I'm quietly lurking, but for what I'm doing outside of CircuitPython, aside from working, I've just picked up a first-gen Surface book. Been a Mac user for ages, and I need a bare metal Windows machine for some accessories I want to use for streaming. All right. SDW is lurking, which means next up is Summersoft.
Hello again. So last week, as was mentioned, I did some stuff with Adabot. I removed some remaining code that was left over from when we were using Travis CI, so I got that out of there finally. I changed the repository label validator that used to flag the repositories if they were missing any of the standard set of labels that we want on them, but we actually could just have Adabot update them instead, so it does that now. One of the long issues on the contributing page was the permissions validators for the CircuitPython librarians team. Some things that used to work stopped working after some public, I won't call it embarrassment, but it was a humility type moment. I realized that was actually the case, so worked around that. So that list is no longer there, well, shorter now. And then I started working on some changes to the needs release validator that basically checks if there's been commits since the last release. We'd like to have it not include things that don't affect the user, so more CI related things that shouldn't drive a release. And also last week, I been kind of jumped back into Rosy Pi. I'd hit a goal that I could take a break on, and so I took a break on it and jumping back into it. I'm getting closer to running tests again. The way I set up the new architecture, basically the web server and the actual running of the tests are separated from user space for security reasons. But that made it hard for me to see when it was breaking, so that it was silent or failing silently. So I finally figured out how to get those, which sped up some progress over the weekend. And then also I started thinking about changing how I hand rolled my test syntax and changing it to actually use something more along the lines of unit test or PyTest. So for this week coming up, I'm going to finish the needs release validator changes, and then work on a patch to add the black code formatting checks to each of the actions YAML files, and then just keep pushing forward on Rosie. And then of course work with Kattni on increasing some inner workings of Adabot knowledge, which I'm more than happy to do in a community setting if people would be interested. So that's all I got.
All right, thank you very much. Next up is Scott.
Hello. I released the Beely MIDI library last week. I still need to get it in the bundle. That's a note to myself. I should do that soon this afternoon. I spent time debugging it with Jerry H. There was some connectivity issues, and it seemed to work after we told his iPad to forget the device and reconnect. I had a similar issue, so there's probably some reliability stuff there, but at least we can just turn it off and back on again. I'm going to be supporting John Park this week with Beely MIDI as well, so we'll see if he hits the reliabilities as well. Reliability issues as well. I helped HireEffect with linking stuff last week as well, and then circled back to low power. I had a big long list of stuff I needed to test, which is good that I had that list because most of it didn't work. So I've been kind of plugging away at Pulsin and fixing stuff. I think I fixed a couple reliability issues with Sleep itself, so that's really good too. So I got to circle back and finish off that testing list this week. And then I have kind of two kind of higher level quests that I have. One is that I'm getting in ESP32S2 tomorrow, which is exciting. So I'm going to support TAC with testing of TinyUSB on there and start to get my feet wet into the ESP IDF and the build system they've got going and all that stuff. And then just chatting with a little more, she also asked if I could help with reverse engineering a USB protocol for a fever scanner, which is like a handheld thermal camera, but the thermal camera is tuned to the temperatures of human body. So I'm gonna get a dump from her and then work on spiffing up VUSB so that it can figure out what their protocol is, which will be a great way for me to both hack on VUSB and to do the reverse engineering. And then outside of CircuitPython and work, I alluded to it already, but Animal Crossing been pretty fun, hanging out with some folks and getting some new stuff. And as my friend put it, being a living the capitalist nightmare that is Animal Crossing, because it always has you in debt. And yeah, exactly. Age of Empires 2 is something I'm still interested in playing. Didn't play any of this week, but I'm feeling it. I have a hankering for it. Another thing I have a hankering for is doing PCB layout. I spent a number of hours trying to lay out an FPGA feather. So I may take a crack at that some more, but it's pretty tricky, especially with larger components. And then I also have a piano keyboard that I want to lay out a board for as well. So I've got ideas about that, and that should be a lot simpler. So I may actually do that first. I've been going for runs to get myself out of the house, and I made pizza dough over the weekend, and we're making pizzas tonight. So I'll be good.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up is Zoltan.
Thanks, Kattni. So in the past week, I have found and fixed a couple of bugs in Microlab and added a couple of new functions and features. I don't know how many of these have made it into 5.1, but I think it's never late. It can happen later. And on top of that, I had to update the documentation. So for the coming week, I have no particular plans yet, at least as far as programming is concerned. And otherwise, I have a couple of projects for which I have to design a couple of PCBs. So that's from me.
All right, thank you. And Andrew is lurking, but I have notes. So let me read those off. From Andrew Tribble, this week, began working on a NeoPixel-based CircuitPython run system of RGB hexagon lights as a bit of RGB wall art. going to try and make a full hexagon be addressable as a single pixel within the NeoPixel library by making a custom board using a WS2811 on custom PCB to get some PCB experience as well. Outside of CircuitPython, been playing some GTA 5 LSPDFR Plus, a plugin that takes the core concept of GTA 5 and flips it on its head. So the player is playing as law enforcement and is responsible for writing tickets, making arrests, and overall crime prevention. That is definitely different. All right. So I have some people lurking, which means next up is C. Grover.
Well, I wrapped up my Kronos projects. I did some power wiring that I wasn't happy with, so I tore it out and put it back in. But I wire wrapped all of the data and low power connections behind some standard headers on featherboards, and it brought back memories of large scale wire wrap projects I used to work on. Yeah, it brought back those memories, but it was pretty simple, and so I really only had 2 solder joints in the whole project, and that was kind of nice for troubleshooting. But wire wrap is pretty reliable too if you put the circuitry in the case. So I may be doing that a little bit more on some of my projects. Let's see, I worked on the unit converters library and added dew point and heat index helpers to that. But I found an Australian approach for combining heat index and wind chill called the apparent temperature method. And I want to take a look at that and see, because, you know, when I'm going for a walk, I'll look at the wind chill and I'll look at the heat index to figure out what I'm going to wear, right, when I'm going out in the weather. The wind blows a lot here. But the AT method combines both those, so it might give me a little chart that I can use that will help me stay warm or cold or whatever. I still have 2 lonely PCBs to assemble and test over the next week. They ignore me when I walk into the room now. They won't make eye contact, so I got to get busy with those. I want to get back to designing more boards, so that really is a fun part of what I like doing. And I want to try my hand at some flex circuits at some point, even though I don't have a use for them right now. I'll find one. Outside activities, I'm working on another solo CD and developing some cinematic themes that I've been working on in my head for a number of years that I've only partially formed. And I'd like to write more symphonic music around that, and we'll see how that works out. Feeding and watching the birds in the backyard. I'm their caregiver now. I never thought I would be, but I'm a slave to them. And I'm getting back into scratch cooking, and my success rate is better than 50%.
Hey, I'll take it. All right, thanks.
Apparently, my wife has given me a thumbs up most of the time.
You can't go wrong there.
No, it's good.
All right, excellent. Next up is Charles.
I haven't been doing a whole lot, but I still pecking away at trying to get a keyboard interface that works reliably in CircuitPython, because it's like I'm trying to do an 88 key keyboard that I got from a company called Cintar. I got the key bed, and I'm trying to figure out the most reliable way to wire it, because one of the things it has that I have never understood how it works is the aftertouch and velocity sensitivity. So we'll work it out. But that's what I've been doing for projects outside of CircuitPython. I've been playing around with Grand Central, talking to various things, and I'm also working on a project to have a remote camera at the gate for my brother-in-law's horse farm, so we can see who's coming and going, you know, for safety reasons. Anyway, that's where I am. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is Dan.
Hi. All right. So I'm pretty much finished up with the fix on the UF2 bootloader for SAMD51, which was writing zeros to random places in Flash. Not random places, but right after the bootloader, which is a problem because it causes projects to fail after they power cycle them. So I have a fix for that. It basically involves making sure that the voltage is up to snuff before we go from the bootloader into the user program. And there were a whole bunch of other problems associated with this that were sort of latent problems in the bootloader, and I fixed some of them, and there's more to do, but I'll do those later. They're not as important. I was just about to do a release, and then I found that when I was doing storage that erase file system on the SAMD21 board, it would crash my Linux system with this new bootloader, but I'm not sure it has anything to do with the new bootloader. So I submitted a Linux bug report, and I'm testing it out on another machine, my laptop, instead of the desktop, and it's not failing. So it's maybe hardware specific. So this all may be a red herring. So assuming that all goes fine, I'll make a release for this new bootloader soon. And then the next thing to do is to add some stuff in CircuitPython.org so that you can see which bootloader is the latest bootloader for your board and download it, just like you can download CircuitPython. So there'll be an addition to the CircuitPython.board pages. I fixed a bug, as was mentioned earlier, with BLE radio start scan, which needed a default argument. In non-CircuitPython stuff, I helped out some people adding SAMD51 support to an Arduino library that does internal flash storage. And from now on, I'll finish the bootloader, as I mentioned. I'll add the bootloader links, and then I'll get back to doing some more BLE work, which is to do add this Adafruit sensor services to CircuitPython. We already have them in Arduino land. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Next up, I have notes from David Gloud, who says LED shim from Pimoroni support in IS31FL3731 library. Next up is Foamy Guy.
Right. So for this week, I had actually quite a bit I got dug into over the weekend. So running through them, I did tested out a brightness fix on the Featherwing library, and that's for the 16x8 matrices. I started working on an update to the Circuit Playground library to allow it to play music without blocking or any sound files, really. But the way the with context is used to get access to the pin made that to be a little bit more difficult than I had originally thought. So kind of scrap the idea on that for now, since you can still do it directly with audio out. Worked on one of the compass examples, adding the calibrations for hard iron calibrations from that script that Lenoir had created. Testing and merging on a PR that was for the DHT library. So these are the old school temperature and humidity sensors. And this was a fix for better error handling, especially on the Raspberry Pi devices. I guess when you read from these sensors, it's not super reliable. Occasionally you get bogus data. And so there was a PR that was existing to kind of handle that bogus data and turn it into a meaningful error instead of just returning those big values. So I tested that out on the Trinket and on the Raspberry Pi over the weekend. David Gloud's PR for the LED matrix Featherwings for the Pimoroni hat. He was working on that, and I saw one of the PRs go by over the weekend was just a small update in the README to list that. So I went ahead and checked that out and got it merged. And then the last two I had for this week was a couple firsts for me, which was the first time building the CircuitPython core into a UF2 file. And then also my first time using the BASA tool to try to flash CircuitPython onto a device. So did pretty good with building the UF2 file, and I was 1 for 2 on my devices with Bossa, but now I get to play with J-Link, so that will be fun as well. For next week, I'm going to get back to working on the game guide, take another pass through the open PRs and issues to try to find some more that I might be able to help with. Possibly some updates to a couple PyPortal examples and learn guides. I got a note for later in the notes to talk about that one. And then hopefully going to get a chance to build this mini KVD device. So this was from a user came in to help with CircuitPython room maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. They were having trouble with Trinket M0 that they were trying to use in a project, and it was for this mini KVD device, which is like a little hotkey keyboard. So that was the first time I had seen it, was when they came to the chat room asking about it, and I thought it looked pretty cool. So I got some of those ordered, and the boards have come in, so I just got to get those built. And then wrapping it up, outside of the CircuitPython world, one of the things I've done in this past week or so is I've been working on automating Adobe InDesign using IDML. They have their own XML-based markup language that lets you kind of build and tie together different components in your document. So that's my first time messing with anything like that. Definitely a different thing that I'm used to working on, but it's been pretty fun. And then lastly was last week, my courses started up. So I'm teaching programming fundamentals in the evenings, and got suddenly transitioned to online, as I mentioned all the classes lately have been. So that's been a bit of a learning curve, but I've got that going on now. So 2 nights a week I'll be around, not nearly as much in the Discord, and that's what I've been working on.
All right, thank you very much. Next up is Hierophect.
Hey, so last week I worked mostly on a bunch of memory and linker stuff, as well as adding the F7 series to my big F7 and H7 PR, which is just what I've been doing for the last couple weeks. So I got support in for the STM32 F767 Nucleo, which is kind of in between the F4 and the H7 series. It's a pretty powerful chip. It's not quite as fast as the H7s. It's 280 megahertz, but it does have a lot of RAM and a lot of flash, and it'll probably out the bat have a little bit more module support than the H7, because the H7 has so many differences, whereas the F7 is a little bit more similar to what we've done already. So it'll support things like Pulse IO and Bus IO a little bit sooner. I added the MPU memory protection unit and tightly coupled memory support to the H7, which was what all the linker stuff was for. That was really just kind of an interesting learning experience, and it'll probably carry over into some IMX work, since that has a lot of similarities in terms of needing to use the really fast, tightly coupled memory as opposed to regular RAM, so that you can get the full advantage of these really fast, really fast processor cores, like from on the M7 series, which are all the way up at 400, 500, 600 megahertz. If you use regular RAM for those, you don't get the benefits of going at that level of speed. So interesting to start working with all of this stuff and get a little bit better at it, and hopefully that'll carry over into new projects. Dealt with a lot of hard faults as a result. When you get stuff wrong in the linkers, it really goes wrong. But still, learning experience. On the personal end, I got myself a 3D printer. We got the new Lulzbot Mini, which supports flexible filament out bat, so I'm very excited about that. Looking forward to doing some kind of robot muscle kind of projects that I've been thinking about. Yesterday I did my first what I'm calling screenless Sunday. So I try to take all day, 100% no screens, don't even look at my phone, don't even look at an iPad, just completely off digital. I I still worked on projects. I just wrote them in my notebooks, and where I had emails that I wanted to send, I kind of wrote down what would go in the email, and then I put it on a to-do list. And it went really well. I mean, I got to bed on time. I got all my projects done. I did a whole bunch of things that I've been meaning to do. So, would recommend in general. Screenless Sunday. This week, I'm going to be working more on module compatibility, making things work between the H7, F7, F4, blah, 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 all these new chips, and working on the documentation of the STM32 port in general, since we are hoping that others will be able to come in and contribute. And if they don't understand how it works right now, it might be a bit of a learning curve. So I'm hoping to write some more documentation to make that an easier process. And that's it for me.
All right. Thank you. Next up is Jeff.
Hi again. Last week and so far today, I released 5.10. Thanks again to everybody who contributed. The bulk of my time went toward Protomatter, the RGB matrix code that is working on SAMD 51 and NRF, and I've been staring at it all meeting with one of my Rainbow test programs, so that's a lot of fun. There's at least one more memory problem. I'll be chasing that this week. And in my playtime, which is also kind of work time, I took a couple of steps with Blinka and PureIO SPI, which Maker Melissa talked about. It was fun to help out there. This week, actually I did this morning. I reviewed Scott's lower power patches, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that land. I will respond to the Protomatter review if there is more of that comes in. I will get this memory allocation problem fixed once I chase it down. And that's really putting in the back of my mind that this code has to either allocate memory that is garbage collected or that is not garbage collected because of the moment at which we have to allocate it. And this turns out to be really hard to reason about. So I will be thinking about, are there other things that we can provide to make it easier to reason about? I haven't come up with anything yet, but, you know, thinking about it. I also want to write more code to use Protomatter. Some kind of scrolling text. So think a stock tipper, but it's going to show whimsical things and made up numbers like dogs patted today 52. I don't know what it will do, but looking for a couple of ideas. Anyway, outside of work and computers, we can still walk around outside here. So going on about an hour-long walk almost every day. Going to wear a mask out today. It's time to normalize mask wearing. And of course, there's always the cooking and baking. So my phone's taking a second here, but I made these lovely loaves of bread and I did an egg wash, which I don't think I ever did before. And it just made the top look that much prettier. So yum. Also, I'm really hungry right now because lunch is after the meeting.
Jeff, I feel like you actually need to display made up numbers like 11D12.
Oh, a list of made up numbers?
Now that you've said that,
sure.
Yes. Anyway, thank you very much. And that does look delicious. Next up is Jerry.
Hi, that does look good. Let's see, I've slowly been migrating boards whenever I can over to 5.10. No problem so far. Looks really good. And yeah, and not a whole lot accomplished this week. I'll get to it later, but next week I really have no idea what I'll do, but one thing that's high on my list is to try and finish off the RFM9X updated PR, just to bring it up to date with the RFM69 PR, which is still in review. And yeah, most of my time in the last couple of weeks and probably for the next week or two is spent on a project for my former day job. I've been reconscripted. But it's been a fun project that involves getting C-Force, a Force kernel written in C, running on these micro-semi FPGA smart fusion boards that are Cortex M3. So we got it up and running, which was a major thrill this week. And for anyone who knows Force, seeing that OK prompt was just a real pleasure. And now I'm trying to remember how to use Force, but the reason we use this is that the FPGA designer that I've been working with for the last 30 years, and for all the projects we build, the initial power up and testing of the boards is done with Forth to allow really simple, easy testing and scripting of tests to test and debug all the interfaces. And then we also, use it to run test programs to test software too. But initially, it's really just the bare metal testing, and so that's been a lot of fun. And then the other thing is that we went for a walk today and ran into some baby foxes. They were really cute. So there's a picture of one of them over in Pet Photos.
I saw that. That was incredibly adorable. All right. Thank you very much. And that is status updates. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Next up is In the Weeds, if I can get there. And In the Weeds is an opportunity for more long-form discussions, whereas status updates is a couple minutes. This is for us to discuss stuff that doesn't really fit into status updates or questions you might have, that sort of thing. If you have any, feel free to post them in the chat channel or into the notes, and we will turn it over to you when it becomes that time. So first up, I'm going to turn it over to Foamy Guy for the first topic.
All right. I think this one's probably pretty quick, but just something that came up last night with a user in the help with CircuitPython room. They noticed they have a PyPortal Titano, and they were asking about good resources for making interfaces for that. So I know, and I've used this one before. This is what I pointed him to, was making a PyPortal user interface with Display.io. This is a great guide. But one thing they noticed was that one of the pages in this example, it makes use of the temperature sensor, just putting the current value on the screen. And because the Titano, and I think the Pint as well, they don't have the temperature sensors, so it makes the example code crash on those devices. So really just wanted to get the idea out there to see if we had any thoughts. Really my first thought was just editing the examples, maybe to use try catch or check specifically the device name with one of the imports. I think is an import board or something. One of those can check the device name, but basically just making those examples so that they will catch the error, so that they can be used on the PyPortal Titano and the PyPortal Pint, which are lacking the temperature sensor.
I think a try and accept would work better. To actually check the board name, you need to do a different import, and it doesn't get hairy if you know what you're doing, but if you're brand new to it, it can look a little confusing.
Okay.
So if we want to update that code, I would suggest using a try and accept, because that's fairly easy to explain to a new user. You know, you're trying to do this thing, it doesn't exist, therefore you run the next set of code.
Yep. All right. I will. I can start working. I think they are in a repo. They're from the Learn Guide, so it's not part of a library or anything, but it is big enough that it's part of the Learn Guide repo. So I can start working on some PRs for those this week.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
I think try and accept is good if you don't know the parameters, but it's clear if you write code based on the board name, because it's the board that matters. I think if you use try accept, you don't actually, like, your code won't actually explain why the temperature sensor is missing in some cases.
Gotcha. Okay.
This is something that came up with Geek Guy had an issue about returning stuff instead of throwing exceptions, and I think this is a case where I think it's better to be defensive about it rather than responsive, where I think try and accept is a responsive way to do it, but you can. So what I'm saying is my preference would be to check the name, because then the code makes it clear that it's different boards that cause it to work differently. Whereas if you just use try accept, it will work across everything, but it may not be clear why it works differently in different scenarios.
Gotcha. I think that makes sense to me. The only question that came up from that side, though, was if the Pint and the Titano do have separate board names. I'll have to look into that a little bit if we do end up going that route.
Yes. Yeah, and that would be a case where try and accept as your only option, and I think just having a comment is fine. But we really like, if we find a case where that's true, we should really not do that. We should really have separate builds for every board so that we can do exactly those sorts of checks.
I will try to look into that. I don't have I have the standard Pi portal in, but no Titano or Pint, so I can't try it out myself. But I will try to look into figuring out if those have separate names somehow.
You could probably just load the other two builds on this regular one, but I can also look.
That's an option I hadn't considered. So I guess if the screen size is the main difference, maybe I'll give that a try.
I mean, maybe the screen wouldn't work, but if the screen doesn't work, it's not the end of the world either.
I can still see what I need from REPL and everything.
It's not going to break anything is the point. It just may not work.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good to know.
It's a weird trick.
A couple of different weird testing cases, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the text chat, they are saying that the Pint does not have a separate identity within the machine, uname machine, so that won't work.
In this case, then, for the time being, what I'll do is go with the try-catch, but I will also make sure to put some comments there that explain why it's doing it.
Perfect.
And it may be a reason to make an actual Pint build if you wanted to dip your feet into that for the reasons that Scott gave.
It sounds like that would be a fun thing, but that definitely would be a brand new thing for me. So I can give it a try, but I will probably very likely need some more help trying to do something like that.
We're here.
You just got through building CircuitPython for the first time. I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
For this particular one.
Yep.
And the how to add a board guide is really handy too.
Perfect. Yep. I will start working my way through there. See what I can get figured out.
Thank you.
I think that covers it. So we can move on to whichever one is next.
All right. Excellent. That would be me. So the question I have is, how do we want to handle libraries not intended for PyPI? Many of them have setup.py.disabled, which is to say setup.py was renamed, but it's not consistent. And is there any objection to just using that as a standard? The reason for this is Adabot checks for setup.py, and if setup.py is not found, it triggers a check that says setup.py is not available for PyPI compatibility. That's a vaguely inaccurate check because some of them are just straight up never going to be on PyPI, such as a Circuit Playground library. And so there are just straight up libraries that don't belong on PyPI. Is there any objection to just including a setup.py.disabled file in the library repos for the purpose of being able to utilize, because we still want to have that check because we want to make sure that the libraries that are intended for PyPI have the appropriate files. So the check needs to exist, but right now it's triggering on a bunch of libraries that were never intended for PyPI. So it basically, it gives us a way to run that check without, it's basically, we would be using it as a flag, ostensibly.
Yeah, that sounds good. And if the contents of the file were just an explanation, that would be cool too.
Okay.
Like maybe that's the place we put the reason it's disabled.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that sounds great because it doesn't, the actual setup.py content doesn't need to exist because we're not running it. So, okay.
And to extend it, Kattni, I just thought about this. This also kind of goes back to that long-running question we had over requiring Blinka or not, and I think we still have that check.
We do.
I'd have to look. So we should probably be able to link the two of them, because if we're not going to require PyPI, then we obviously don't need Blinka. So
Okay, that sounds excellent.
I think it's kind of a two birds, one stone.
That is perfect. Okay, making notes. All right, good. We're done there. Next one is a question for Anne. What is the best way to get newsletter info to you from community members? So, for example, Foamy Guy had some suggestions for the newsletter. What's the best way to get that to you? Because Discord obviously wasn't it.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. I just want to make sure we're doing what's best for you.
Okay. There are at least two ways. One, well, the dog knows best. You can put in a pull request on the newsletter repo, and I always check for all the PRs.
Okay.
If anybody sees that I closed a PR and didn't merge your thing because there was a merge conflict, and I likely used your content, and I should note that in the PR when I close it. So there's a fear that I'm ignoring you. Also, if you have Twitter, if you tag it with the hashtag CircuitPython, I go through and look at the week's posts, tag CircuitPython, and add things there.
Okay.
And for my special friends, all of you, you can write me an email at anneb@adafruit.com, and I have a special folder in my email that I put all the newsletter content, and I'll check that too. So that gives you three ways. I apologize on Discord. This process is somewhat new to me, and I think I've overloaded the channels in trying to sweep up news. So if you'd please use those three, that would be best for now.
That is excellent. All right, thank you very much.
No problem.
And we're good there. So next up is Hierophect.
This was kind of a question for Scott. Just wondering how the hardware meetups, you mentioned that you were having hardware meetups over Discord. And I was kind of wondering about how the structure was, because I actually got a request this morning from someone who attended our CircuitPython Boston meetup, who was wondering whether it would be whether it might be a fun idea to have a virtual meetup for kind of casual CircuitPython discussion, as opposed to kind of the weekly meetings where we have sort of a formal structure for it. I was kind of interested in the idea because I like to just kind of have casual chats and talk to people about CircuitPython, especially if they're new to the project or interested in contributing. But I wasn't sure how that would really work over a video call, just because, in a physical meetup, you can kind of branch off your discussions and people can go off and kind of talk to each other. Whereas in a call, it seems like if you don't want to have everybody talking over each other, you really need to have kind of a topic and a mediator. So I was wondering how that kind of was working for the hardware meetup, and whether you had any ideas.
We're still working on it. So like the Seattle Hardware Happy Hour is every first Thursday of the month. So we kind of had a time goal for last week. So we set up the Discord, and the way it ended up is like, you set a time, so everybody got on at the same time, which was cool. But we ended up kind of just all being dumped in the same voice channel, and it was kind of that sort of thing of like, I talked for a while and posted some pictures of things I was working on, and then like Sophie posted some pictures and talked about it as well, which was fine. It was cool to have it, but I was kind of hoping for more what you're talking about, of like everybody gets on, but then there's like multiple things happening in like multiple voice channels to go with it. so Chris Gamble has now like changed the voice channels there so that there's actually a cap on different voice channels, which I think could be an interesting forcing function for it. I think for you, for like casual CircuitPython, you could just pick a time and just hop in this channel here. Or the other option is if you want to be a more physical group, I'd recommend kind of joining the Hardware Happy Hour, and there's not a Boston group yet, but you could use that as a platform to find people who want to keep meeting up in person in the long term as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to set up a much more regular kind of Python on hardware meetup at Artisans Asylum, and obviously that's all been put on hold due to COVID. But I'll think about how we could set it up and just kind of think about that structure. It sounds like it's still a work in progress on your end, but if you have any, if you guys encounter anything at the hardware meetup that ends up working really well, I would definitely love to hear about it, because I think it's an interesting social engineering project, trying to get people to be able to have kind of side conversations on a video call. It's tricky. It's not organic. So
yeah, I don't think we figured it out, but I think one thing that's interesting is like, our group here is all online all the time, but these are groups that are traditionally in person and plan on being in person later. So although the meeting part of it is kind of been a bit weirder, it has also been a chance for us as like Hardware Happy Hour is a meetup that happens in multiple cities across the US or across the world. And so like it is a bit interesting that by us all being online, we're getting a lot more cross-pollination, which is a really cool thing. And now that we have the Discord server, it's like a central spot for us to all coordinate around this kind of common in-person theme too. So I think, it's going to be weird. It's not going to be like we're in person, but there's going to be some really good stuff that comes out of it as well.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I think so. To kind of, I guess, cheer on what Scott's saying, I think so. In the way that the Oslo conference worked it, where they had, a text channel for each of the various topics, and then both how 3H has done their voice channels and setting up different ones, and they seem to be generally named for now. But I mean, I think it just kind of takes a little bit of organization up front, and you can have, moderators assigned to each particular area that you're trying to present and whatnot, and they just kind of have the flexibility to move things around as they need. But I think for Adafruit server, if you wanted to do it in here, you can start out, CircuitPython being the central location, and then if there are separate conversations that need to occur, people can just agree to go to one of the other voice channels.
Well, I'll think about it. Thanks for the input, folks.
Yeah, I think Summersaw's right that the Oshwa thing was the best way I've seen that, where you get multiple conversations going. It was basically structure the start and then allow people to split off into different conversations from there.
I wonder if it would be good to facilitate that in some way, where you kind of like start with some preset topics, talk about news, etc., but then invite people to post kind of their own topic ideas in the chat, and then actually kind of do have people kind of vote for which topics they want to split off on, and then have like a set splitting off topic period or something like that.
Right.
I don't know. It all has to be a little bit more organized. But it's good to think about. Okay, great. Well, that's all I wanted to discuss. So.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. This has been the CircuitPython Weekly for April 6th, 2020. We will be posting the video and podcast of this meeting up on YouTube, and it will go out to podcast services. So if you're listening later, remember that you are always welcome to join us. You can go to adafru.it/discord to join the Adafruit Discord server. We are there all week chatting, so if you have questions or just looking to discuss something, please come and join us. We have all kinds of channels and a huge community that is available for all kinds of support. So come on and check it out. Thank you everyone who participated this week, and we will talk to you all next week. Thanks everyone.
Tanu?